Since the beginning of time, there have been two items that have never lost value, and there have been wars waged for, and these two items, even today, have value compared to other objects. And those two items are land and precious metals. And I'm going to use the term gold to refer to precious metals, but effectively, land and gold, since the beginning of civilization, have not lost value and have been the basis of things of value from then up till now. There have been wars waged over territory and land, even when the population of the world was much smaller. There were still many wars over territory. As you can see in the modern day, there are still wars over certain territories. Now, land has a different value rather than having land as the empires did in the past. But I'll go into that a little bit more in detail about land. And that basically is in terms of businesses and what you can do per square foot of area you have. Regardless, there's a second thing, which is precious metals. And precious metals have been the basis of values, the basis or backbone behind currency prior and modern, and always has been a item of trade. And there's also a reason behind that. And these are, again, my opinions, but let's go into it. So starting with land. Historically, land or ownership of land by kingdoms or controlling of land by kingdoms directly translated to areas that kingdoms controlled and would effectively control resources as well as personnel. So if there were colonies of large civilizations in the past and the territory that location was under, those citizens could be called upon to wage wars for more territory or produce resources for the kingdom to use. Now, obviously, we don't have kingdoms and we don't wage wars so much for territory because it's pretty well defined and policed by the United Nations. However, we do see it similarly in terms of business. If you don't look at it as a bloodbath of war, but you look at it as business as a form of war in terms of negotiation, production, and how much a business or an individual can do per square foot of location, depending on where it is. Businesses are all dependent on how much profit a person can turn around for the square foot of land that business or that individual is on. And that's also dependent on, and that also dictates how well the business is. Now, whether the business has a large overhead and does that, those are all different stories. But effectively, if you whittle away any business for it to survive, it's dependent on the piece of land that it's on. Now, there are some caveats and some exceptions as far as virtual businesses that take place online, and that's a different type of value. But I'm not talking about that right now. And I'll just say real quickly what I believe that the online value is in terms of virtual real estate, and that has more to do with traffic because effectively the resources are infinite. There's an infinite amount of virtual real estate, so it doesn't directly translate. But as far as land and precious metals, both of those, there are a fixed amount on Earth. So and as long as the human race increases in numbers, there will always be a shortage, or there will always be a decreasing amount of land and precious metals per person. So naturally, the value of that will always go up over time as long as the population maintains. Now, regarding land, as I mentioned, there's not wars waged on it, but the amount of business or production that can take place on a square foot of land is direct, or the amount of business can do is completely dependent on the square footage of land that is present. Now, as I mentioned, land is a fixed resource. There's always an increasing number of people, and there's only a fixed amount of land. So naturally, if more people need more land to do business to serve other individuals, the cost of land has to appreciate. There's no other direction for it to go. And I'm talking on a grand scheme of things. Now, and that's proven time and time over again. If you look historically what land value was and what it is now, it's always going up. Now, on the short term, land value may increase or decrease depending on either political climate, laws, and maybe how the economy is doing. But if you look at it decade to decade, land is generally speaking always appreciating. Now let's take a look at precious metals, for example. Precious metals also, again, there's a fixed amount of gold, a fixed amount of platinum, a fixed amount of silver that cannot be created or destroyed on Earth. However, so then the question may be, well, why is it valuable? There's a certain amount of mining that goes into procuring gold, silver, or platinum. Therefore, generally speaking, the value of gold, silver, or platinum per ounce should be associated with the cost of personnel, equipment, of mining. Now, we all know that's not true today because it fluctuates based on a number of different factors, and it also fluctuates based on, unfortunately, in my opinion, confidence in the dollar. The lower the confidence in the dollar, the increase in price of gold. The higher the confidence in the dollar, the price of gold decreases, which is unfortunate because the dollar really should, which it is, should be based off of the amount of gold, or every dollar should be backed by gold, which it isn't anymore. So unfortunately, the price of gold nowadays is slightly parallels mining costs, but more on a day-to-day basis, it really parallels confidence in current economic state. Now, whether I agree or disagree with that is irrelevant. It just is what it is. Again, there's a fixed amount of precious metals, so there's always going to hold value. What's very interesting is even though a currency may depreciate over time, the value of gold or silver will generally keep its buying power. So what I mean by that is if a piece of gold has the buying power of $1,000 today, even though, and you may be able to exchange it for $1,000, and $1,000 gets you a TV, then in the future, if a TV costs $2,000, that same amount of gold should fetch $2,000. So effectively, the same amount of gold is worth $2,000, even though the dollar has devalued and has inflated. So in my opinion, I really believe if somebody wants to beat inflation and they're in it for the long run in terms of investment, land and gold is a great way to go because it's something that will at least beat inflation and maintain the same amount of purchasing power. And you can look at graphs for gold prices or silver prices, and you can see the same. One other thing, I do believe silver is a better investment than gold because 50% of silver that is mined has industrial use. Now, silver ounce for ounce is not as valuable as gold, but it does have industrial applications, so there's always going to be a need for silver. Now, I can't remember the exact statistic, but of the amount of gold mined, I think only 10% ends up being used industrially. So gold has a lot less of an industrial use than silver, but nonetheless it does. And platinum is actually one of the best. I believe that the industrial use percent is equal to or greater than 50%. So I overall think platinum is one of the best investments, although it's not a quote gold standard investment since gold is so ubiquitous and gold is just so well known. So invest as you will. That's my opinion on land and gold, two items that have never lost value since the beginning of civilization, and I believe always will have value just to their fixed nature and the demand for it with our increasing population. Okay, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Share in your comments below if you think there's anything else that has value since the beginning of that hasn't had lost value since the beginning of time, or you believe always will. One caveat, I believe Bitcoin is one of those things that may or may not. I'll be able to make another video on it. And again, thanks for watching.